In 1941, a Swiss engineer was walking with his dog when he noticed that burdock burrs clung to his clothes and his dog's fur quite easily. He was super intrigued, and so what he did was he took these burrs, he went and got a microscope, and he realized these burrs have small hooks that cling to the loops of fabric and allowing them to adhere well. This allowed him, or this inspired him, shall I say, to bring this to real life. Could he recreate this natural instance and build a product around it? I want to let you know that George de Mestral, if I pronounced that wrong, I'm sorry, he was successful. Today, the Velcro brand is a business that licenses Velcro for the tune of $1.8 billion a year. One natural inspiration, a $1.8 billion company. Today, we're gonna talk to you about how nature can inspire your next best idea. All that and more today on Mission Daily. Stephanie.
Hello. Welcome back. Hey, everyone. This is Stephanie Postles, CEO of Mission.org and Albert's amazing co-host. So
I try.
For anyone, you do a good job. So for everyone who's joining us, or if you're new, every episode, we like to uncover lessons that are here to upgrade your mind, your body, and your spirit so that you can be a better business leader and tap into different levels of leadership. So today, Albert and I are diving into nature and how to be inspired by it and different lessons we take away from it.
Which is why we started off with Velcro, because it's pretty darn cool.
So today, we're going to be doing just that because we're going to be looking at 6 lessons in leadership and business inspired by nature. So Albert, our first lesson, inspired by nature. Take it away.
All right, so this is a fun intro that we did, but it is true. Velcro Holdings, anyone can look this up. It's also known as Velcro Companies, or it's called Velcro. You're talking about a huge multi-billion-dollar company that was inspired by just observing nature and finding and maybe asking some questions like why? How does this work? Why does this work? And that's what's so cool about the Velcro Company is because that simple question, of course, allowed the company to figure this out. George de Mestral to figure this out. He observed this in 1941. By the 1950s, the company is up and running. He figured out how to make it. And of course, we all now know what Velcro is. Fun fact, isn't that interesting that every time you have Velcro on your apparel, it is from them. But that is not the only example. This has happened over and over again in business and in nature. And you'll see that this is quite often interconnected. They call it biometric design, this idea that we can get ideas, inspiration to answer huge questions that we have, especially in physical engineering, from nature. So examples are birds. Like eagles have upturned wing feathers that reduce drag. Of course, now we see that modern aircraft use what we call winglets to mimic this design. It improves fuel efficiency, reduces turbulence at the wingtips. Again, people are seeing something they don't quite understand. They want to find the answer to it. They study it more. They figure out something that can be applied to their business.
So for biometric design, a lot of people think about products, which, you can find so many stories about products that were developed by people walking out in nature and observing so many different things and coming back with a product idea, like Velcro, like airplanes, like a bunch of designs. But when it comes to a non-product idea, I've also seen this take place when it comes to the org structure for a whole company. So there's a root system called the rhizome root system that these trees have that inspired a whole org structure called the rhizomatic organization structure. And it's all about a decentralized network. Really, if you think about empowering team members, so there's not hierarchies, they're not having to check in at every level, get their ideas approved, get their processes approved. They're really empowering team members to decentralize the whole structure so that more gets done and more things happen quicker and at a more rapid pace. And so that was all inspired by trees and this root system and this aha moment of, what if I built my whole company around that? So those are 2 examples of the biometric designs, one for products, another one for non-product related things.
And then Stephanie and I started talking and asking each other, hey, do you actually do this? Do you actually go into nature to find inspiration, answers to problems, whatever the case may be? And it turns out we both do it, even though I swear to God that I'm not, I don't believe too much, I think, in spiritual. I did realize that oftentimes when I have a hard problem, I will go for a walk. I will light a fire and just kind of sit by it like a campfire style. I got a fire pit, so I guess it's kind of man-made, but a little bit of nature.
Still a fire.
Yeah, and I'll turn off my headphones, turn off everything, and go try to find inspiration. And so what we wanted to talk about today was Not only do we know that we do it, we know many, many other people could do it, but we wanted to talk about some of the lessons that we believe to be true or we have gathered from nature that we think can help just about anybody.
Yeah. So biometric designs was our first one of what can you be inspired by when you're out in nature, when you're looking at animals, when you're thinking about this. I mean, we have two things here showing, it directly inspired different products, different way of managing people. Those are just two examples, but just to get the juices flowing of how can you use nature to be inspired. And like Albert said, I also do this quite often. If I have a problem, I will go and sit. I will go and I gave an example of laying down on the grass and just staring really intensely at the ground and the pebbles and seeing what's in there and just seeing, can I just be and just see what comes? Do I have any ideas come to me? Is there anything that I see in this presence and just breathing and being without my phone? And so that's why we're excited about nature.
And we also found out that we kind of observe nature through different lenses. So Steph has more of a, I'll let her describe it, but I definitely look at more how the animals are interacting with their environment.
Mhm.
Stephanie is more, I guess, just the environment. Is that the
Yeah, I
best
mean,
way to
I'm
describe
definitely,
it?
yes. I will, I mean, I do pay attention to animals, but not as closely as I do the dirt, the ground, the trees, how things are moving, the wind, and more of just being in the presence of all of it. And not only being inspired by visuals, but also just the presence of being out in nature. So it is a little bit different of just what's going to come to me going out into nature with an intention of here's something that is baffling my mind right now. I can't figure this piece out. I don't know how to think about this. And just going out and being super present in nature and then seeing what comes because I think inspiration can come from so many different areas depending on what your goals are and yeah, what your intention is. And it can also be directly inspired by staring at an anthill and seeing, hey, what are they doing in there? How are they carrying such heavy things? How are they all working together like this? And so it kind of depends on the intention, but yeah, I think a lot can be solved just in that presence and that quieting of your mind and less distractions.
Stephanie, perfect segue. I'm glad you planted that for me. Let's go. Let's start talking about our personal lessons, our personal beliefs, things that we believe to be true that will help other people. I'm going to get started. You mentioned ants. It was funny. Before we even got recording, Stephanie made fun of, Stephanie and Lacey, the producer, made fun of this idea that I would reference ants again. And I don't have an ant farm. I don't watch Ant-Man over and over again, but I do find ants compelling. The one thing that we know about ants is that they can build unbelievably large colonies and structures. They're highly organized. And so one of the things I always think about, and I notice it's not just in ants, it's in termites, it's in beavers, it's in other animals that build. Every animal that builds can only successfully build in one of two ways. Most likely it's both. The first thing is time. They use quite a bit of time and they will dedicate all of their time to doing the thing. In fact, one of the funniest natural videos I've ever seen is they take a beaver, a rescue beaver, and they gave it a bunch of stuffies. It immediately started trying to build a dam with its stuffies. Like it basically is going to spend all of its time doing that thing. The other thing you're going to need if you don't have enough time is you're going to need a lot of help. Of course, ants and termites have unbelievable amounts of help in order to do those things. But everything that is going to be built needs a lot of time. It needs a lot of time and it needs a lot of help. This idea that you can rush to something great, I think, in my opinion, a lot of this comes from the last 25 years where we've seen venture capital get involved and help businesses build extremely quickly. But I think that for most people, going slow, taking time out of the equation would give them a higher probability of success. Because if you do something
Mhm.
for a long enough time horizon, you will be fine. Alex Hormozy talks about this all the time. Like if you do the one thing for 10 straight years, thousands of times, you'll be good at it. That's just how it
Yeah.
is, right? And so I think time is one of the things that people rush. And I always think to myself, if you want to do something great, just throw time out of the horizon and just keep going.
I like that. I also think there's a concept around like a lot of people try to lone wolf things and they just try and be on their own, heads down without any support. And so I like the idea of either you need a lot of time or you need a lot of help. Like who can you pull
Yeah.
in to support this vision? Because lone wolfing anything is probably a really hard way to do it without any support, anyone checking in on you, anyone giving you skills that you don't have. And I do think right now in this era where everything is, so many things are virtual, you really can just stay behind your computer all day if you want to. You don't really need to get out in the world. It's easier than ever to not have that community, that support, that friendship, that someone to be checking in and like helping you with where you're trying to go. So you either need a lot of time, even if you're lone wolfing it, a lot of time to get there, or a lot of help and maybe a little less time if you have help around you.
Yeah. More help shortens your time. But in general, you need one, if not both of those things to be true
Hmm.
to give you a better chance. Of course, anything, maybe you can build something on your own. I have no clue, but I wouldn't bet on it. That's what I think.
All right, so we're talking about this concept of having help, support, which I think is a great segue into our next lesson or insight from nature, which is all around ecosystems. So, this ecosystem interdependence, meaning there's this mutual reliance among different species and elements. And if you think about, the bees and pollination and soil and flowers, there's so many things that are connected that are making everything work. And when I look at how many instances take place that are really impacting the entire world, I mean, how much a bee does and how important bees are, especially when you really look into what they're doing and how many things they're connected to. I mean, it's massive. And so taking this and putting it into business of how can I think of my company, my product like this ecosystem that has other connection points that might be outside of what I'm building. And so if you think about this from building out a product, whether it be a physical one, a digital one, maybe I'll stick with digital for now. There are things that happen before they buy your product and after they buy your product. So let's just say Instagram, you're building the Instagram app. There's different phones that they're on. So you need to probably think about the phones that they're on, where they're calling in from, what's the process of how they're joining. And then afterwards, where are they going out to? What are they clicking out to? What ads are they clicking onto? And so really thinking about like zooming out from the thing that you're building, zooming out from your company and seeing what are the other ways that my customer is going to be interacting on a before and an after standpoint? And how can I make sure that journey is connected all the way through so this customer is happy right when they get in and right when they're going out? And I'm thinking about it from a more holistic standpoint. So there's a lot of examples in nature where, there's so many pieces interconnected, and that's why so many things flow together well because of this interdependence.
So I love that example that you just provided because a lot of people I think over index on marketing, and which is weird because we're a marketing company, but it's true, right? The ecosystem of a business extends well beyond the marketing. The marketing is just what gets people to maybe try your product, but all the other things are, I think, why someone would come back to your product, right?
Hmm.
I think for a lot of us, if you try a product that you really don't like I think wish.com is suffering from this right now. Hey, shout out
Hmm.
Wish. If you wanted to sponsor the show, I'm sorry. Like you
You
sell
can't.
junk, right? Like you literally
Yeah.
sell junk. Like people have made it into a meme because it went from, hey, there's this cool app to get really like inexpensive goods to, wow, everything on there sucks. Right?
Hmm.
So,
Yep. And
so,
can I
so
return it? No,
yeah,
I
I
can't
can't
return
return
any of
it.
it.
I got this crappy thing. And so it's like your marketing was great. So why aren't people coming back? Well, they didn't really like what you had to sell. So marketing might
Hmm.
get someone to try something, but marketing won't bring someone back if they didn't like the product, they didn't like the experience. And so we
Hmm.
talk about like, so one of the things I've read about, which is I think really great, is this idea is like all of disappointment exists between expectations and reality. That's what it is. You expect this, you get this. If it's really far apart, it sucks, right? Whereas like, I think when people, I always use this example as well. People, I've never heard anyone say a nice thing about McDonald's, yet I see everyone eat at McDonald's, right? There's always a line. We
Yep.
joke about it all the time, but because they've kind of told you we sell inexpensive food
Hmm.
that tastes like this, like it's consistently this. And enough people have
Yep.
said that's got good value. And so it's just this thing that, business, when you're building something, you have to remember all those follow-up touch points, which I think is annoying, but it's true. That's what people experience. That is what will actually determine your success. The front
Yep.
end of it,
Annoying but necessary.
annoying but necessary. That's right. Annoying but
Yep.
necessary. That's why so many companies that you hear are successful, they have follow-up surveys and customer experience. Check out Experts Experience Mission Podcast. Plug. What up? But how do they make sure that people get what they paid for and enjoy what they paid for? I think that's the hardest thing.
Yeah, I see this sometimes really well and sometimes terrible with different food products where it'll just be a sauce that looks super bougie and nice. And you're like, okay, this looks cool, but like, what do I do with it? And like forgetting about if I take this thing home and I get there and I don't have a plan, like the plan is to put this with something, but I probably need ideas. If this is something that I normally don't work with and it is kind of a newer thing, like to get me past the finish line, you probably have to, inspire me with, hey, this is how you can use the thing. Whereas we have a really good market here called Central Market, and so many amazing new products from around the world. They're constantly sourcing things. And the good ones will show you, okay, this is from Japan and this is how they use it. And here's an idea that you can use it. And then other ones I get sometimes and I'm like, this looked really cool, but I don't remember even how I use this with anything. Like it just looked cool and the sample was good, but I don't
So
remember what to do.
a little bit of a tangent, but I got a fun story about this. So Kraft Foods used to be one of our customers, and they used to have a clear metric about how much they wanted to pay per recipe subscriber, because they knew if you were subscribed to Kraft recipes that you would end up using more Kraft products. And so they spent an inordinate amount of time not only getting people to sign up, but also to get chefs and stuff to submit recipes so that people knew what to do with mayonnaise. Cause it's like, like you can't sell more mayonnaise
Yeah.
unless someone's using more mayonnaise. And
Yep.
they went to an unbelievable amount of time and energy and effort to doing this to make sure that mayonnaise lovers knew what to do with mayonnaise more than, like, let's say sandwiches. And
Yeah, that's smart.
it didn't work
honestly
on
wouldn't
me
know
because I
what
don't
to
like
do.
mayonnaise, but I get it. It makes total sense.
I mean, that's kind of like relish. Like if you give me other ideas of how to use relish, I probably would, but I don't know much to put it on other than hamburgers and tuna fish. And like outside of that, like just give me some inspiration and show me 5 new ideas and I might become an even bigger fan. I don't know.
Which is why sriracha is straight fire, because people
Yeah.
figured out quickly they can add it to anything that's savory
Mhm.
and it kind of tastes good. And
Yep.
sriracha, of course,
And their
sells
marketing
out all the
showed
time.
that. A
Oh
lot
no,
of their marketing was
sriracha
showing.
famously spent no money in marketing.
Oh, I guess I'm thinking of a different hot sauce then.
Possibly.
You spent a lot and they were showing how you could basically use it on anything and everything. And I feel like it was like it was just impressing that message on people's mind.
That was
Like, this
Frank's.
can
Yeah, I
go
put that shit on everything.
Maybe it was Frank's, yeah,
Yeah,
or maybe
Frank's Red
Truff,
Hot.
one of them. But
Yeah, no doubt
yeah,
about it. So we talked about animals, we talked about building, we talked about ecosystems. Let's talk about longevity, survival. And I mentioned at the top of the show, I love observing animals. And the one thing I think about that it can be learned by anybody is if you watch prey animals and you watch predators, like how does a moose get to full size? How does a predator get to full size? And that is they never stop doing what it is they do. So animals are either evasion animals or they're hunting animals, right? In evasion, I don't follow animals that just kind of hide in the shell like turtles. Like that's not interesting. But like, but like a moose, in order for it to get to full size, it has to be unbelievably good at evading, and it has to never stop evading. And so naturally, prey animals often are substantially more fit. They're more fit and can go for longer periods of time than predator animals. Predators have to, of course, typically sneak up on the animal, or in the case of the African painted dog, which is, by the way, the most ruthless killer on earth. Don't ever watch a video with them. If you're curious how they kill, they actually just stalk the other animal until it collapses of exhaustion, and then it has a small mouth, so they can't actually bite and kill. They pull the animal apart while it's alive. It's horrifying.
alrighty then.
Yeah, but what you'll see about the animal kingdom is like the animals that do make it to old age, they never stop. And I think that is a big challenge for anyone who, whether you're a solopreneur, you're a small business, or you're an enterprise, is like you're never done. There is no destination. People say, well, if I made $1 million, that I'd be happy. If I get to this, I'd be happy. If I get my product, in Walmart, I've made it. It's like you're literally never done. And that's either scary, annoying, or maybe it excites you, right? But if you're in the world of entrepreneurship or you're in the world of business, you are never done. You're constantly improving, or you're constantly just doing the thing that made you, right? But the point is that there is always somebody else. There's that young, inspiring, just like that young lion. The young lion wants the pride.
Mm-hmm.
There's always someone coming for your territory, for your shelf space, for your market, for your customers, and your customers have endless choice. This is another thing that I think business leaders have a really hard time grasping is like, if I purchase your services or goods, I have choice too. I actually wanted the best version of whatever this is, like whether it's lights, cameras, microphones, accounting services. Stephanie wants the best version of it. I want the best version of it. So we're never just looking at our current suppliers and being like, this is great. Nothing needs to improve.
Yeah.
If you're not improving, someone else will improve. And if someone else improves to a point way better than you, guess what? they're going to win the business. And that's just how it goes. It's an unfortunate byproduct of business, but don't enter the arena unless you want to play this game. You're never done.
Yeah. And I think that this concept is also important to instill in your team and your culture when you're building something, because an employee who comes in and thinks like, okay, this is my bar, this is what I do, like that's a really hard person to work with. So I actually think it's better to instill this concept of, even when you think you're doing a good job or this is a good job, like the bar is always moving and it's always raising, because we as a company get to keep up with where the market's heading. And that means your job will always be evolving. You come in as this and it'll probably be different every 6 months, every year. And that, to me, if you put that up front, it attracts the right people who are ready to constantly keep moving, growing, changing, versus the one who's they come in and they say, okay, you hired me for social media. So I just come in and I post on these 3 platforms every week and I'm done. Like, this is what I do. Instead of being like, well, platforms are going to continue evolving and strategies will, and your whole job will, and you actually might need to try a bunch of different content styles. And yeah, your whole role might be completely different in 6 months because everything's moving so quickly. And so just prefacing that and like getting that into your team culture of like, this is what we do here as as a company.
That's it. You're never done. I mean, it hurts to
Mhm.
hear that. Like I think about like warehouse people that work in fulfillment, and let's say you love fulfillment. Like that's my jam. I love packing boxes. I don't know.
Mhm.
Like that's you. There's nothing you'd rather do than pick and pack boxes.
Pack boxes.
But the whole point is the industry is never done. And so there's companies right now inventing robotics that have humanoid arms that can pick and pack. And when those robots get here, guess what? They're not going to need you. Like just like that. And just like that, your role disappears. And so
Mhm.
it's not even that someone else is coming. It's that, like kind of what Stephanie says, the whole industry, your industry, it doesn't matter what it is. It is changing. Some change faster than others, but it never stops. It just doesn't. And so if you think that you want to do something for a long time, or you want to get successful, which typically requires some time, you just have to know no matter what it is you're doing, you're not done. Like you are
Yeah.
literally never done. Like today is just your current version of your product. And that's it. That's unfortunate because next year your competition's coming out with something else. And I think that's really hard to stomach for some people who've worked really, really hard and maybe they taste a little bit of success is they feel like they should feel like they've made it. It's like, nah,
Yeah.
man, you just started.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think when thinking about history and zooming out, it's a very interesting mindset shift that's taken place of the people who, grew up thinking, I'm going to stay at this company for 40 years. I'm going to retire. Like my path is set. I don't really need to change that much because like, it is a finite thing. At this age, I'm done and I'm tapping out. And so it's kind of interesting thinking about like that worked for a while. And now where we're at, like that doesn't work. I can't think of one job that works in. I mean, even if you go to the industries that still have retirement ages and all that, there's still innovation happening. There's still like the best player wins type of thing, the best person who's innovating, bringing new ideas, looking outside their industry. Like there's not a spot to hide anymore where that mindset is, oh yeah, let me just get to retirement age and finish up. I mean, I can't think of one anyways.
I think the education industry probably has been like that the longest, but that is quickly
Mhm.
being shaken up with
Yep.
and I believe it will shake up even more. There's more talk about should governments fund vouchers so that people have more choice in where they send their kids to school. We
Mhm.
saw college enrollments are falling, so the traditional path of like, hey, I become a tenured professor, I'm set for life. It's like you have actual colleges closing down, right? Like actual
Yep.
colleges, and college it's unclear. The value prop of college becomes murkier in today's economy. And then I guess in tomorrow's economy, it'll be even murkier, right? There's a lot of
Mhm.
majors I think that people or colleges offer, people take. I just don't think their enrollments are going to be that good going forward. So what
Yep.
will you do? So even like someone who thought, oh, I'm a tenured art history professor, that might not, I don't know what that means.
Mhm.
Like we don't have a school. So your tenure's
Yeah.
over, you know, like,
Yeah.
like that's what's going down, which brings us to crisis. Oftentimes in nature, we see crisis from extreme weather. But Stephanie, you're the eternal optimist. Talk to me. Crisis means what?
I mean, we've been in a lot of crisis. I mean, crisis to me means, well, chaos. Of course, there's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of unknowns. There's a lot of things that you feel like you can't solve.
Like wildfires,
And
like tornadoes,
yeah,
like
yep,
like hurricanes, like droughts.
yep. Like your company's going under, your whole industry changes. All of a sudden, nothing is the same as it was. A big shakeup happens. Yes, this happens in nature, it happens in companies, it happens in life. And yeah, the biggest thing I think you can look to a lot of animals, once again, of how do they handle all these natural occurrences, and what's the animal that's, what animals have been here the longest? That's the ones I think you can really zero in on of like, how have you survived this long? So, what are some animals that you can think of who've been here a long time that we can learn from?
Well, first of all, I want to go back to the weather's portion of it because I think there's a
Yeah.
lot of gold in this concept. So whenever there's an extreme weather event, there's usually the most extreme counter event. We just recently saw the droughts of California. Um, so typically, when there's tremendous drought, it gets dry and it dies. Dry vegetation, dry dead vegetation specifically, is susceptible to wildfire. Wildfire
Mm.
burns up dead vegetation. Dead vegetation and ash, therefore, fertilize the ground. Then the next cycle begins. There's abnormal growths typically. And what's happened in California is there was an abnormal drought, but it's also been followed by an abnormal rain cycle. So if you were to look at California water systems right now, they've had more water basically than they've had in a really long time. California did not build any reservoirs to store this water, but that's neither here nor there. But effectively, when something really bad happens, oftentimes, again, that time window is back in play. You just need enough time to weather it. Typically, what happens is the vegetation regrows, and what happens when animals is they evade the terrible times, but they can return when it's good, and then they basically can feast. So it's like, can you survive that great length of that abnormal duration? And I think back to, and I like using animal examples, as Stephanie alluded to, but alligators have been around since prehistoric time. They've outlived the dinosaurs. They're probably going to outlive us, right? And they are unbelievably adaptable to their environments. And one of the things that, for example, alligators do as they've moved north, this is kind of scary for people who live maybe in the Carolinas, but they've started moving north. And what they do when it's super cold is they can actually they know it's cold. They will stick their nose up above the water line and they will be frozen into the water. They're basically frozen in the water, but they can somehow shut down their geothermal systems and like slow down their breathing and survive like actual freezes. People always
Mhm.
assumed freezes would kill these guys off. Nah, they don't die. So
Yeah.
it's it's like another example of like, hey, in order to if you can survive the worst times, you will be rewarded with the best times. And that is where, I mean, animals that can do it, animals that they do it, they get to live. They get to live longest. And I feel like for businesses, it's the same thing. Crisis will happen. We talked about in that book, bad things are going to happen that you just don't recognize. COVID, political strife. Like if you're in Turkey right now, massive inflation, right? You don't get to control these things. So it's like, can you survive?
Mhm.
And I told Steph, I equate food to cash. Animals that can survive don't need a lot of food. So businesses that survive don't need cash, meaning whether it's outside cash because they have a big surplus or they have low expenses, it doesn't matter. I think that that's survivability. If you don't need a lot of outside cash, you get to survive.
Mhm. Yep. Yeah, I would say the ability to control the cash inflow and outflow as well, like being able to cut it off quickly if you need to, and just having that flexibility is also like you might have high expenses, but as long as you can cut those off, at the drop of a hat to be able to react to the environment that you're seeing, like that adaptability and flexibility of controlling your expenses in a way that's not, oh, I'm in a 12-month deal where I can't get out of this and I have all these full-time employees that it's really hard to, let people go. So, yeah, that adaptability, same kind of concept of like when chaos hits, when disaster hits, can you control your circumstances to the best of your ability?
That's it. You get to fight another day. The which by the way, we talked about in one of our other episodes, but we talked about how like right now there's a lot of layoffs. Of course, people are suffering from it. Certain industries are really struggling. Commercial real estate is a great example. People are saying, "Oh,
Mhm.
commercial real estate is going to die," and we talked about it in another episode. Like, hey, I don't know if that's true. I think it's going to change. Right? People are going to figure out because con- consumers, us, we're going to demand shorter leases. more flexible lease
Mhm.
agreements, and then someone's going to figure out a business model that services that. That's what's going to happen in
Mhm.
all this space. The space is not going to go away. Does anyone believe that the bulldozers are just going to come take down skyscrapers? I don't think so.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think about it too when I think back to, like, the different financial crises that we've had, and I think back to the time period of probably '08 or so, watching what happened to my family who was super invested in certain ways and stocks and all that, and the whole portfolio drops. And, when you're over leveraged and you're counting on those stocks, you're counting on those dividends, or you're counting or whatever, and you need to pull money out of it, like that right there is the part where you're not going to be able to weather the storm. And I always look back at, what many people did during those, the financial crisis of like pulling all their money out, selling things, trying to like react quickly, but it was a little too late. And had you had the chance to hold on and actually weather the storm, most of those companies, many of them shot back up. It just took time. And if you had the ability to stay in them and watch, let's say, like talk about Bank of America, like Bank of America went so far down. And I remember watching my dad sell and my family and like people just pulling money out because they were so panicked and they were so leveraged in their situation. Like that was income they were relying on, or they needed to pull it out because of how their house was and needing to get extra money. Like that frantic reaction to a circumstance is, what can kill off your finances, your business, I mean, your luxuries, whatever it might be, because of that over leveraged. And had you been able to weather that storm, which is, I was younger at that point, but I just held on because I was like, I don't really want the tax implications. I don't really want to sell these stocks. I don't really know how to. I just held on to everything. And a couple of them, sure, went out of business, but most of them actually ended up bouncing back. It just took time and the flexibility for me not to be so deep in it where I was like reliant on everything that I had, all my investments, like super reliant on it. I wasn't. So I could just weather the storm and wait until, the rainy day went away.
Yeah, that is something that people, when you're in it, I know that advice. No one wants to hear it. Like if
Yeah.
someone might be listening right now who's maybe they just got recently laid off, or um, maybe you've yourself as a business owner had to lay people off, and you're in a really tough time. It feels like it'll never end. Like I'm sure it feels like
Mhm.
it'll never end. But we've history has proven time and time again that the bright side is on the horizon. We haven't
Mhm.
reached we as people haven't quite reached, like, total civilization collapse and everything falls apart, and we've not experienced it.
Mhm.
Um so if I was betting, I'd bet on the resilience of individuals. So stick with it. Try to figure it out.
Yep.
I just commented on
Yep.
someone's LinkedIn post that was like super down, and I just said, "You could always do something else, right? Like it is an option. Like you don't have to just
Yep.
continue hating whatever it is you're doing."
Yeah. You're choosing this, everything around you. You're choosing all of it. And you can also choose something different very quickly.
Choose something different. There it is.
Yeah.
Those are just
Mhm.
some of the lessons we wanted to talk about. Literally, there's endless lessons. Like and there's endless opportunity to be inspired if you go out and explore nature, which I'm a big believer in. Stephanie's a big believer in it. Stephanie, how do you go about it? You definitely have a different way than me, but how do you go about it? Tough times are hitting. Typically, it comes from tough times, um, or maybe it's just a regular habit of yours. Talk to me. How do you do it?
Yeah. So some of the things that I do is if there's ever any big emotions coming up around a decision or something that's happening, I feel like I don't have the solution to it. Number one is don't make a decision. Like get outside, put your phone away, and just go sit somewhere in nature where there's no distractions. And that's step one. Like just completely get away from the distractions, get away from all the energies that are approaching you, all the people asking for help, whatever it might be. Just completely, like, in a way, disassociate from that reality and choose another reality, which is nature and calm. So just finding a spot to sit, being super present. Step two is I will start observing things at such a deep level. Like when I'm out there, I will just, and this probably looks really weird to people who are watching me, but I will be so present with individual pieces of nature. So, for instance, I will sit and tap into the wind of like, what does this actually feel like? Like just tapping into that one thing, nothing else. Close my eyes, just feel that. Next, what does it feel like to have the sun on me? Like, what does that feel like? What is it doing to my body getting this vitamin D on me? Next, it might be observing things like animals, like we talked about. Like, what are they doing over there? What's the process? Let me get down on the ground and lay down and look at these ants. Like, what are they really doing? How are they operating? And just, it's really just being observant. How are the trees blowing? How are they connected to each other? Why is this bamboo tree all up in this other tree? So how is water moving? Looking at this little stream near our house, like just observing of like it's really flowing around these rocks. It's really not forcing it. It feels very just flowy, go with the flow. Like that's a great lesson right there. Just watching water. If you have a fire, I think we mentioned this earlier, lighting a fire like in your backyard and literally just staring in it, like just staring into it and seeing what comes. So there might be visual things that you can get direct ideas from, like we mentioned about Velcro. You have an inspiration, you look at a bird, you have an inspiration. I'm going to build an airplane different. I'm going to build Velcro like this. Of course, like there's great aha moments I'm sure many people can experience just by seeing how does this squirrel store away nuts? How does this bird find this random place to live? Like what kind of resiliency they have by choosing a spot that maybe isn't that good, I wouldn't think. So like let me look into that a bit more. I'm sure there's a lot of visual ones, but I think also just the act of being present and seeing what comes to you in the silence while you're in a different environment and solving a problem in just a different way. Because what I don't think is helpful with any problem is sitting there and trying to solve it actively. Like if you do
Huh.
that, you're stewing on the problem and you are becoming the problem, and you can't solve a problem with the same mindset of how it got you there. Like you literally can't get out of it. You need to get out of the situation, zoom out, think differently. You can't just stay and stew in it. And so that's why I think nature is one of the best, inspirations for just thinking differently and, having some visual cues that can get you there, or just tapping into, what it's like to be away and in a different space.
You have managed to verbalize kind of, I guess, what I do too.
All right. See, we're the same.
Yeah,
We're
I've
the
not
same.
really verbalized it in that way. For me, again, this typically comes from moments of high stress. In general, when people are super happy or euphoric or things are going great, you're not really looking for a way to escape. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you kind of want to
Yep.
be in the joy. But when
Mhm.
things get really, really tough, I've always found that I like doing things that I would say elevate the heart rate outside. So I go surfing, hiking with my dog. Um, I don't intentionally go skiing, but whenever I do go skiing, I don't listen to headphones because I feel like I don't know. I feel like close. It sounds so crunchy, right? I just feel
Probably not to me.
part of nature, close to nature, right?
Uh-huh.
Sliding on the snow. You get to hear like the
Yep.
crunch of the ice. It's mostly ice on the East Coast, but
Mhm,
you
mhm.
just feel different. And
Yep.
I've always found that if I can get my heart rate elevated and kind of almost tackling the elements, I think is a great way to phrase it. Is like because I'm not doing something passive. I always tend to do something that's very active. I feel as though things don't matter. And so what happens is that all those problems that you had that were insurmountable, they kind of also don't matter either. And I always jokingly say it, but it is true, is you don't have to continue. And like it's like and once you realize that like this misery I feel or this hopelessness I have a sense of or whatever the negative feeling is, it's like what well can't you do something else? Like could you do something else that doesn't have this stress or doesn't have this emotion or doesn't have this anger. Mine's typically anger. That's what I feel.
Mhm.
It's a great way to get some clarity. I think so. I agree with you that if you are remove yourself from the environment because in an enraged situation, it is unlikely you will make a good decision.
Yep.
It
Yep.
just
Yeah.
is. It's
Y
super unlikely you'll make good decisions. Like when people get called out on their cell phones, we see it all the time now. They're enraged. They say things they definitely don't mean. They do
Mhm.
things that they're out of character. Part of that is just them succumbing to just overwhelming anger. So it's like that's why you
Mhm.
gotta get away. That's what I do. I just try to go do something hard, and typically get some joy out of it. And it does make my whatever problem it is seem very small, and then it
Mhm.
becomes an easier thing to solve. If you don't think the problem's hard, then it's easy to solve, isn't it? And so that's kind
Yep.
of like how I think about it.
One final thing I'll add too is that we're talking a lot about, chaos and stress symptoms and things that we're feeling, I do think there's a lot of things that you can just watch animals do and probably mimic it and it'll definitely help clear some of that. So, I mean, for example, if you look at dogs, cats, when they encounter a stressful situation, they start shaking. That same thing can be applied to a human body, and that allows you to experience a somatic shaking, shaking out energies. Like, so that's just something that most animals do when they go through something stressful. Um, that's just one example, but I mean, I even think about making noises, yelling, screaming, like, look at a kid, like, what do? They let it all out. So I think there's a lot of ways that if you watch, what do animals do? How are they stretching? How are they moving around when they've been sitting for a long time? I mean, what should I be doing after I've been sitting for a long time? Maybe there's certain things that I can also mimic that's allowing me to get into a different space and following best practices that might not even know right now. Like, I might not know that it's best for me to get up and do certain stretches or be mad and actually just yell and scream and let out noises and just express myself and shake. So I think there's just things that you can watch with animals, or even, like I said, babies who have not been trained yet to like not do certain things, and just see like, what are they doing and how could this also help my experience? Because a lot of the emotions that are felt, they're not in your head. It's not like a strategy that you need to always figure out. Like, a lot of times it's just processing out emotions and being okay with working with the body first, because that's where everything's stored. So I just wanted to add that extra little layer of things that you can observe and just see, maybe it could help me if I'm experiencing heightened emotions, chaos. I don't know what to do. I'm going to go outside and maybe observe how other animals or kids get through this.
There you have it. Tell us what you think. Do you go out? Do you try to experience nature? Do you learn from nature? Give us a shout, info@mission.org. You can leave a comment in the videos. We've been commenting way more now. Boom. We're going to get back
Yeah,
to
we have.
everybody. That's a mission of mission. I guess mine personally,
Yeah,
since I, in general,
you're
am a
doing
bad
it.
communicator.
Until today, until yesterday, because today you're a good one.
What happened yesterday?
I'm just saying, I'm setting a new standard.
Oh, okay.
You're not a bad communicator anymore because now you're commenting. So we're commenting back. We want to hear from you. We hope you all liked it, and we will see you next time.